Hi there, I'm Raya from Active Health Clinic, and today I wanted to speak to you about napping. So we get this question quite a lot: is napping good or bad? And the first answer is that napping isn't inherently good or bad. It is very much dependent on the context. So for some people, napping can absolutely interrupt their circadian rhythm, which impacts their ability to fall asleep or stay asleep, or impacts their ability to have regular sleeping patterns each week. So one of the first things to look at is identifying how much sleep you actually need. And in doing so, if you were to find your average hours slept in a 24-hour span over the last 2 weeks, that will tell you how much sleep you need to be aiming for each night, which may or may not include a daytime nap, depending on the individual and their capacity. So that's something really important to think about. If you're oversleeping of an evening and then you have a nap because you're exhausted and you've got well above your required hours of sleep that you usually get, then it can make it difficult for you to fall asleep that night. Now, again, this is why context is really important, because if you're going through a flare-up or a boom and a bust, you may actually need more sleep during that time. So napping is something that may help you better pace your days, better manage your days whilst in a flare-up. So this is why we say napping isn't good nor bad. It is very much dependent on the context. But if you feel like your napping is interrupting your evening sleep, then that is where we would want to shift it, okay? So if you're noticing that you're struggling to fall asleep, struggling to stay asleep, you're having periods of the night where you are awake extended, then those are all things we want to consider that napping could be contributing to. Now, we also know that it's the chicken or the egg. Are you napping because that's happening and therefore, it's a perpetuating cycle? Now, if that's the case, we would want to slowly decrease the time that you're spending napping, which would then slowly translate across to the time you're sleeping of an evening. And we're talking doing this over weeks. Nothing with your sleep should happen quickly. We're talking about your body clock. We're talking about your circadian rhythm. So you shouldn't do things and assume that in a couple of days it's all going to be better or sleep will do its thing. Generally, when we're talking about sleep, we're talking about a couple weeks. And maybe even a couple months for some people, depending on the shift that we're making, regardless of, whether that be napping or sleeping. So the example I like to give is those who experience daylight savings. It takes us about a week to figure out what time it is and adjust our routine accordingly. And that's an hour or two difference, for instance. So that's something to keep in mind. If you're shifting your sleep, whether that be in regards to napping or in regards to sleeping, that you need to do so slowly so that your body can get used to it and your routine can get used to it before you're making these big drastic changes. Because we know anything to do with those big drastic changes can actually make us flare up or can be a trigger, which is partially what we're avoiding in that circumstance anyway. So that's something to keep in mind. So as I said, napping isn't good or bad, and there'll be times that you will nap. So generally it may be in response to a flare-up, or it may be in response to a activity or a boom and a bust. And in those circumstances, it's absolutely reasonable, but you need to make sure that you're setting it up so that it doesn't impact that sleep that night, and therefore doesn't get into a perpetuating ongoing cycle from there. So it's making sure that you don't nap too close to bed. It's making sure that you don't nap for hours on end, because again, that's going to confuse your circadian rhythm. Your body clock has really only its identification through day and night and through routine, that when we nap, that can throw out our routine. Now, again, there are going to be times that is okay or appropriate, but it's making sure that we're not napping too late in the day or we're not napping too long throughout the day. And it's really important that we are also trying to separate nap from sleep. So you may nap in a different position, you may nap on the couch, you may nap in a different side of the bed or opposite way in the bed, to try and supply your body with context that this is not nighttime sleep. It is not about to get a chunk of 8 to 12 hours of sleep. It's about to get a chunk of maybe 40 to 60 minutes or above that, depending on, again, context. So it's really important that when we are napping, we are trying to change the context behind the sleep so that the body understands that this is not nighttime sleep and it doesn't adjust its schedule accordingly to try and account for that. So this means that when you do have a nap, you might wake up a bit fatigued and groggy and not really sure what time of day it is, it's really important that you wake up slowly. So you start observing the light around you, you start moving your hands, your feet, you start wiggling your body, have a glass of water, whether that be electrolytes, or have a snack as well. So food, hydration, a bit of movement to help the body get going again, to help it kind of wake up to keep going for the day. Now, that's not to say continue on with the day itself full bore and do too much again, but it's more along the lines of just supporting your body in gently and slowly waking up. So not up and going, doing a slow transition if you can, and making sure that the rest of your day or the outskirts of around that nap look as close to your usual routine as possible, okay? So napping may be part of your routine, it may be a rarely thing, it is completely different from person to person, and it's really important to acknowledge that, and it's really important to find your version of napping. And I know that sounds funny, but it's finding that there is the right way to nap for you, or there is the wrong way to nap for you, and that looks different from person to person. The most important thing is to be considerate of what your overall day looks like, what your overall sleep looks like, and how you can best support yourself around that. So I hope that makes sense. We do have lots of other videos on our YouTube and within our AHC connection about sleep specifically. We've got some handouts, and if you have any questions, comment below and we can certainly film another video. Take care.